So anyway, this is, last year Liz taught a class on Pearl6 for Pearl5 people. And much like learning a language, if you learn a language by trying to translate whatever you speak into that language, you'll never learn the language. I mean, you learn maybe how to order dinner, but not much more than that. So after the class, Liz and I sat around trying to translate something I had written into Pearl6. And sitting there just doing Pearl6, I actually learned something. So I was going to try and get just some of the things I've picked up trying to make these modules work. And FineBin Lives, does anyone use that? Okay.
I'm not sure, but
well,
like
what it does, it's a programmatic version of -i. The idea is that you don't want to always have to set Perl5 or Pearl6 live to be wherever you are. You want things to just be able to use what's around you. So it takes FindBin, which gives me an anchor point, scans up the tree, and finds live directories excluding the root, so that, and just uses them. The point behind that is then I can have, if you have a large project and you don't want to install all of it, you can use the current version of everything and not have to worry about playing with your environment. So you can run in-house modules without having to install them on CPAN and then bring them back. There was one place I worked, I created this because we had to push things into CPAN, wait for them to be indexed, and then do a CPAN install in order to run anything because everyone was working in their own spaces. And this allows you to just have something that runs. It's nice in production because I can run Git. I can do a, what? Oh, I can't move around? Okay, I'm anchored. Sorry. I promise I'll stand right here. So, the other thing I found it nice for is, has anyone here ever worked at a place where the production database got, say, demolished because someone did prove? Ooh. So one of the things you can do is put versions of configurations in t-etc, or like the configuration module goes in t-lib, and then you don't end up blowing off production because you just don't give it a library that knows where production is. The other thing you can do that's kind of fun is you can resolve a path, and you can have a bunch of libraries that are over in left field that get used that people can't even see, so it's very hard for them to screw them up. So I'm not going to be describing Perl5. This is about Pearl6. There's some things, just what I learned making this work. And hopefully this will allow people to walk out and write a module. So FineBin is the first thing I had to write. Anyone use that? Sort of Graham Barr's first things. And you know, it's kind of weird, you know, that. And this is kind of the same bad thing they do in shopping malls. You know, you always walk up to the sign and it says, "You are here." I'm not sure I want them tracking me everywhere I go. You know, I'll figure out where I am on the map by myself. Just don't watch me. But you have to do that to your code a lot of times because you want to be able to tell where is a configuration directory with respect to where I'm running. If three of us have got different sandboxes, I don't want to have to go to Etsy Sandbox or something. I want to be able to go wherever my code is running. There's also the issue of an absolute path. A lot of times you're running things with a relative path. You want to get an absolute path so you know you can anchor it properly for searching for other things. One nice thing about the resolving is that you can have a collection of executables that live next to something. You can symlink it to wherever it belongs and still find the real sibling files. Yeah, the other thing FineBin has to deal with that's fun is the native file system, because you might be in user $sandbox Joe Blow on VMS. And that's going to give you a whole different ball of wax than walking up a Unix tree. Now, there are two things that I export from here are &bin and &script. The first thing everyone's got to get used to is the notion the sigils are part of the name. Just say it over and over. It's not like Perl5 where you got a name and you decide what it means. The sigils are part of something. So you get a bin in a script. FineBin used to export a variable $bin. and we all used it for everything, I can show you why you don't need it anymore, and it becomes a problem because then you can get variable collisions. If I change the interface, you don't know what I'm pushing into your space. So right now, all I export are the bin and the script subs. Units. Perl6 uses compilation units. There's modules, there's files, there's all sorts of cute things. But this thing is a module. One of the cute things now is you can have multiple versions of a module installed. You can get multiple authors authoring different varieties of the same thing. So again, in the way that sigils are now sort of part of a name, the versions, the names, the rest of these are part of what you are releasing. So it's good to have your name on it. It's good to have the version on it. Constants. We actually have nice intrinsic built-in constants now. One of the things that can't change during execution is your interactive status. If you type Perl -E, you're not going to transform yourself into a shebang script. If you redirected from standard in, if you just type Perl and you're in the REPL, you're not going to suddenly become a script. So that can't change during execution. Neither can a constant. So I have a constant is interactive, which is a junction. In parallel universes, in constant time, we now have alternate logic. So this constant is interactive. Notice there's no sigil on it. It's just a value. Sigils, you can say they're single and twins. I like the tween the sigil in a name. It sounds more poetic, I guess. But these stars are dynamic. The uppercase tells you that it was auto-generated for you by Perl, if you don't step on the naming convention. So what this is telling me is that my program name is one of those three things. Notice I don't have to say if or have a ternary. I just say A or B or C. I'm comparing it to all three of those at once. Module arguments now. There was a convention in Perl 5 most people adopted was you used a QW with colon something, and you put a colon in front of it, and Perl 6 has made that pretty much part of the language now, so when you start these modules up, the switches don't have to be quote worded anymore. The colon name of thing is now just part of the language. So if you use this with nothing, you're going to hand me, effectively you're saying you're using colon default. Otherwise, resolve, verbose, bin, you can combine them, stack them in different orders, whatever you like. So an example using those, these constants are what I use if you want things to be verbose. If you use this with verbose, you're going to get a constant installed in your space. That's true. If you don't want verbose for your default, it won't be there. But again, these are exported. Resolve is exported if you put a colon resolve on it. I'll show you how. And it's true. You can't change it. It's a constant. Another thing that we're all used to, a few people have gone over, is the notion that objects are objects. They don't auto-flatten. We're used to being able to stack 5 arrays in a row and they just magically flatten themselves out. A slip is a thing that is flattened, flattenable, whatever the right verb is. So what happens is you're going to end up creating a lot of slips. The flatten is a pipe, flat, pipe, straight, pick your mnemonic. So I've got option tags, resolve and verbose. These are a flat list, not a single item containing 2 words. Is that making sense? How many people here have a heartbeat? Okay, so we got 3 dead bodies in the back. Larry's one of them. Sorry about that, man. I didn't mean to kill you. Another neat thing that's part of Perl 6 are pseudo packages. Anyone here ever use next? So you had every : last : caller does pretty much what you think it does. It looks in your caller's space. Unlike Perl 5, where you had to play with Padwalker or symbol and eval funny things, you can be pretty explicit about saying, hi, I want to look in my caller's space for a lexical variable that has a name, or for a constant. Signatures are now part, but signatures, say it out loud. Everything in Perl 6 is what? An object. Signatures are objects. As a matter of fact, there's a sexy thing you can generate these on the fly if you want to. But the fun thing about this is there's a Boolean here called resolve, and it defaults to whatever I find in your lexical space called FineBin resolvedef. Remember that these constants were exported when you wanted them. That's how I can tell that you wanted verbose to be your default. I can look back and say if you want to use FineBin defaulting to verbose, then bingo. I can tell that you asked for it. That's how. So the $:resolve stores whatever you put into $:resolve when you called it. So I have a variable named after the parameter. This is a coercer. It's not a constructor. I said that wrong the first time and Damien slapped me. So what this tells me is when I look in your space, if you didn't export the variable, I'm going to get a nil, which is the moral equivalent of the old undef. I'm going to get nothingness. I don't want to examine nothingness. I want to get truth and falsity. So this Boolean coerces whatever I find, either the resolve that you didn't give me, that defaults to the lexical constant that you didn't use, that's going to be falsified. So I've got a real true or false going through the program. I'm not going to get nasty grams about undefined variables. Now here's where we use that option tags. Remember that flattened out list? If you say, use FineBin verbose, it doesn't do you much good if I don't export the methods to be verbose with. It doesn't do you... If you say FineBin resolve, you probably want more than just one little constant stuffed into your space. You might want the subroutines. So what this says is if you explicitly ask for bin, if you do nothing at all and ask for default, or if one of those flattened out option tags is what you used, you probably want to see the subroutine. So this is a nice way with that constant of being able to label collections of things that you want to export a sub with. One of the things about Pearl6 is you have to export all of a namespace when you ask for bin or default or whatever. These are really packages inside of your module. You get all of them. So if you want to have different collections of what things people see, you can set them with these constants that are combinations of things. And it makes it pretty easy to set up groups of names that things will be exported with if you want different collections of them. Using a constant. Notice is interactive up here, has no sigil in front of it. It's just a value. Kind of a Zen thing. It simply is. The question mark and the bang ternary, people are used to that now, I guess. I still do the C version, and actually, thank you, Larry, the Pearl6 actually says, no, you're not supposed to use a C-style ternary. So when it sees a question mark colon, it actually says, oops, for you. The error messages in Pearl6 are actually pretty polite. The CWD is your current working directory. So there's still a lot of Unix-isms in here. Again, there's a $* that tells you it's dynamically generated for you. A thing you're going to get used to using a lot of are IOs if you play with file systems. IOs for paths, IOs for files. So CWD is an IO, and I know this because I looked it up. Program, however, is a string. And I want the thing that I'm working with to be an IO, so I can just put a .io on the end of it, and I've called a constructor. A really nice... Huh?
It's kind of like an orphan.
Yeah. So you get program.io, says construct me a thing from the program. Especially dealing with a lot of with IOs, you will do thing.io.operation that returns a string.io, that's something else that returns a string.io. So just EI. I don't know. To use the IO, one of the things you can do is resolve whatever you're using in order to find the executable directory. So that's bin from. Again, resolve returns an IO, which follows a symlink or whatever. Absolute doesn't. It returns a stringy path, so I have to IOify it.
Sorry. Sorry about that.
No, it makes sense. An absolute path is a path. It's not a... But it's so bloody easy to just stick IO on the end of it. It's not painful. It's not like I have to have my thing equals and then call IO to new and create a new variable or something. I just think IO. It's frankly, there's places I've seen some stuff where you have something dot type dot something dot something dot another type dot something dot something. I mean, you can end up creating 5 different objects, daisy chain down the line. It where you need it, it works. So again, I want to return a directory. Another wonderful thing in Perl6 with these IOs, parent. People get lazy on Unix because dir name gets you a parent. That doesn't work on Windog. It doesn't work on VMS because you have a volume. So every member's file spec, you had to split up a volume and then reattach it. And oh god. Anyway, nice thing is if you do .parent, you get the parent. If it's a file, you get a directory. If you get a directory, it's the directory above it. If it's the root, you get the same thing back, but you get it back with a volume on it. You can compare them. You don't have to split them and recombine them, and it just works. So this is a working version of bin. Decide if I'm verbose, if I'm exporting it. Bin is either interactive or not, resolve or don't. If it's verbose, put out some pretty messages. If you're interactive, you want the path, which will be your working directory. If you're not interactive, I have to get your parent because it's an executable. There it is. To me, it's actually moderate readable. Although the people that say you don't use ternaries, I don't really care about them. No, I do. So, script is the other one. It basically gives you either minus or minus E, or it gives you the base name. And this one I actually had room in. Yes, you can stack ternaries. So script, note is a say to standard error. The say logic gets a little flaky if you want to use a file handle, because the separators and all the rest of it. So note makes it a little bit easier. You don't have to deal with separate. Just note means you're going to standard error versus say going to standard out. Only problem, and that's a bug in 60 and 6C. Caller lexical doesn't work in the signatures. It blows up. So what I have to do is create a copy and do this further down, which gives me a chance to show off another neat thing. Question marks. A really common thing you want to do is coerce something into a Boolean. So there's now a native language operator, question mark, that's is it true or false? And that saves you from actually calling a constructor to coerce these. It just does it. So that's a working version. If you look at the stuff that's on GitLab, there's a nasty gram in there that says whenever this works, switch it back. So now we got to test this thing. There's test. That should be familiar to everyone. OK and use OK. Most of these, it doesn't look that bad. So if anyone's seen my talks before, laziness is a matter of doing something once. So here's a generic sanity check for a module. Just will it compile? Is it in memory? If I take my program, I convert it to an IO. Parent 2 says go up 2 levels, so that gets me up to T and 1 further up. Because the executable's parent is a directory. The directory's parent is my working space. If I stick lib on the end of that, that's probably where I want to find whatever module I'm testing. That saves you from testing the one that's installed in opt Perl over and over and over again and wondering, why do my changes not affect the test? If I take the base name, I strip off a leading directory, I can get the name. It's easy to encode a package by putting dashes where the double colon should be. So substitute is a nice inline way. And what's great is because you can daisy chain these, you can substitute one thing and substitute another. And do all sorts of cute munging in just one line. At that point, if I can use it, that's a good thing. If I haven't used it, has anyone here ever misspelled a package name? Yeah. If I successfully use a module, I should be able to find its package name in the symbol table. Otherwise, I typo the module. So at that point, I can check it. The $$ thing is the way you reference the symbol table. So at that point, if I can find a name for that, and it matches what I expect it to be, then I spell the package right at least. It compiles, it's the right thing. That's enough. You can use the pseudo class my. We had the caller's lexical. This allows me to see, does something exist in my space without playing with symbol and monkey hacking the symbol table. Before I've used the module, I don't expect to see bin and script in these constants in my space. After I've used it, I do expect to see the two of those, but I haven't installed the constants yet. So you can see how I can check that these things did or didn't get installed. Outside of the do block, remember, use is lexical. It's block scoped. I should, again, find that these are not there. This test goes on for another few of these do blocks where I do a FineBin with verbose, and I check that verbose and script and whatever. It's very easy to check this stuff now without resorting to symbol or craziness. Testing script is pretty easy. I just compare myself to the base name. If I look at what I found as the script, I've got the program's base name, I should expect to find it. One thing I do in my tests is I'll do an OK and check that what I expect is there. Especially if you're using, I think there's a Zeph reporter too. If you're using a reporter type thing, it's like, everyone's seen the message file not found. Don't you just love that one? Hey, what's the, and then you're stuck like tracing the install to find out what file it was looking for. It's a lot easier if you do an OK and say, yes, I got something, and show it. And then, oh, God, I was expecting the wrong thing. So, is compares two strings. It's not complicated. Testing minus E, we get QX. So you can see if I do a minus E, say the script, I hope to get minus E because that's how I'm running it. So prove 6 looks a lot like prove. MI6, assist are neat packages for helping, assist. In Incan, not Incan, in Mayan. So I used MI6 for this. If you do MI6, it will it'll show you, but you can create a basic module. It'll give you the changes and the README and the rest of it. There are a few things that you're going to maintain as basic part. Even if you use build or whatever in 5, there's pretty much one way to do this now with the changes file and a meta 6 that are part of your package. If you do a Zeph install, one thing to notice, it's not opt Perl bin or whatever. There's bins going all the way down this tree. Symlinks are your friends. Just find a directory and symlink everything into it, and you have one thing on your path. Otherwise, you're going to go crazy trying to find all this stuff. So the changes file is now part of what you do. Not very complicated. Guess where it puts the next version? Hey. So this basically, whatever my next version is going to be, these are my changes for it. The meta 6, if you use module builder before, it's not, there's what the build depends on. This one doesn't really depend on much. The source URL is now built into it. That is used by MI6 to do pushing and pulling and make sure that you're up to date. Current version is down there at the bottom. MI6 will maintain the version for you. Pod looks a lot like pod. There's some niceties in the new version where you can have beginning and ending, but if you write the stuff you're used to, it will probably work. So now I want to release this. Type MI6, guess what? 12-step program. So one thing you'll see in red there, you get to type in your version number. In this case, it'll normally just take the last version and ding it up one. I decided I was changing something. I was changing the interface, so it dinged it up to 0.4. You get one last chance to avoid blowing off your kneecaps. One nice thing about this, it will check to make sure, we see that git commit, it will check to make sure that all of the things in your directory have been committed. I think it handles version and git. I don't know that it deals with CVS properly. But the nice thing, is anyone here ever, like, you push something out and you blow something in, you realize you forgot to push it. So now you got this release out here that you got no copy of the code. So if you've got dangling files, if you've got files that are not committed, MI6 won't release. It'll scream at you that you've got to clean up your space. One of the things it also does here is it will put a tag. It would be nice if it had like REL underscore or something in front of it, but at least you can find these tags. You can do a git tags and see which things you've actually uploaded. One nice thing about Zeph, you can install the current directory. So you can just go Zeph thunk. Don't have to wait for indexing or anything else. You can just install something right away. Any path will work. So if bin is the root of all evil, my next problem is to walk up the file tree. This is the reverse of find. So file system parent is the next module I wrote. It scans up a tree. So this is where I can look up and find where do I think I might find a library. And this has now in Perl 6 there's even more than one way to do things. Ooh, I'm halfway. So multi-method. This particular version takes a stringy, which is a role of a thing that can stringify itself. So the roles are kind of nice. I don't have to check for any specific thing or anything derived from a string. I'm just looking for anything that I can stringify. Defaults to all. This weird-looking thing is a slurpy hash. This takes any collection of arguments on the stack, sucks them up, puts them in a hash for me. At that point, you can see what the filters do. There's an all, if you want to get everything you find. There's directories exists. I can put more of these in here. These little things with colons after them or before them, are file system tests. I always know how to compare themselves to these things. So basically what I say is if you want all of the files, I'm going to hand back true. Now on the way back out, I flatten that hash out. The same width tells me redispatch the same thing I had here, but now I've replaced the filter. So if your filter was all, you've now got a value of true. The other end of this thing takes an any. Whatever you want to give me, hey, I'll be nice. We'll take what we can get. After that, a really nice thing about the signatures, you can recycle values in them. So here where I have resolve and verbose, I can pass them straight down to bin to get the default. I don't have to worry about storing them and creating a new variable or calling an extra thing with it. So the way you order these things in the signatures can be really handy when you pay attention to it. This came up a few times in classes where people say, how do you tell which one of these to run? If you give me something with no arguments, if you just call scanup, I've got to pick a version with the default because you didn't give me an argument. So I'm going to end up with the first one. If you give me something with a character string, I end up in the first one. I can tell the difference between a character string. It's more derived than an any is. It has a higher score. If you give me something that isn't a string, then I have to go to any land because the string doesn't resolve it. So there's a couple of rules of thumb. Probably if you're using multi-methods, if you're going to have defaults, you have to make sure they don't conflict and confuse the thing. so that you have to make sure that the defaults are either more derived from one another. If I had a bunch of these that were all stringy equals something, it wouldn't be able to tell. So using the multi-methods, you got to pay a little bit of attention to how you use defaults and the types of arguments to make sure that the dispatch makes sense.
The compiler tells you.
The compiler will tell you, it'll be, but it's annoying to find that out after you spend half an hour typing it all in.
Right.
It's now the original version of this, because I was thinking like this was Perl 5, was that you'll pass in a block. So I had a signature. I finally figured out how to write the signature for a thing that's a block that takes an I/O and returns a Boolean, and then I realized how stupid that was. We have smart matches now. You don't need to wrap everything in a closure. One level of indirection is a smart match. So a lot of the things that we did by passing around subroutines and wanted filters and all the rest of it, they don't need to be code anymore. Because I can just compare things. The only thing that makes no sense as a filter is a string, because then I can only compare it to the literal path. It would only match one path. There's no reason. I can just do a -d on the path and be done with it. So this actually works pretty well. You want to pass a string. I know that you're labeling a test that I have canned. If it's not a string, whatever test you gave me, I'll use. So, oops, did I go through two there? No. So now this, pretty quick. People have seen resolve, absolute. Where I'm starting from completely is fun. This says when you do the resolve. Has anyone here ever tried to resolve a dangling symlink and gone to the middle of no place? Yeah, well, completely will puke if it can't completely resolve the link. So you'll get an error before you look in some place that doesn't exist. So where I'm going to start scanning, if you wanted it resolved, I'll do that. If not, you're on your own. It's whatever it is. Convert it to an absolute path. Absolute returns a string. Make an I/O out of it. At that point, if what you gave me matches a directory, first use of a smart match here, then I know I can start there. If it isn't, then I have to go into its parent to find a directory to start scanning out. So I can call parent. Either way, I know I'm in a directory at this point. Gather and loop. Have people seen the gather and take stuff? People, a couple. Okay. A gather is a way of accumulating things. We've all seen the forever push onto an array and then much cleaner. Gather and take work together. Everything you take gets gathered and handed back. Loop, in this case, runs forever, which is why you make sure that you exit, or you may not get your answer very soon. So the gather and take work together, loops, if you're going to use a loop. In this case, I'm gathering all the paths that match your filter. And I'm done when I'm at the root. Now, one of the options I gave you was skip root. So if I look and I'm at the root, and you're skipping the root, maybe say so, but I don't want to take it. Now, what I'm actually going to take, I check that you're at the root, but remember, you can append something. This is how you get .lib on everything. So I can do a path to add or not. Whatever that is, I compare it to your filter. If this filter is code, it could say, look in that place. Oh, see if there's an etc directory below it. Open the config file in it and see if it has the memory setting. I don't care. I have no way of knowing what you think you want. All I know is if you match it, you're getting it. Nice. It's a lot easier this way. We're not passing subroutines all over the place. So this is a working loop that will accumulate directories going up the tree. Again, the gather and take work together. The skipping, the at the root, and ending it. So you might ask, what's in a seek?
What's in a seek?
Glad you asked. So that, which should be pretty obvious to everybody, it's laziness. The thing about a seek that is different than push onto an array. In this case, what I got was a path path to new. You can see how these paths work, by the way, because this one is resolved, but if it were a relative path, I'd have the working directory, which is how you convert it to absolute. When you call absolute, it takes the old working directory the object was created in and expands it, which is neat because you can do a change dir and still call resolve on something and still get the right absolute path. Woo! Also, you notice this is a Unix one. If this were VMS, it would be something else. I don't have this VMS box to test this on, but what's interesting about that, though, is these are untyped. You've got no bloody idea what you're getting back. Depending on what you took, depending on how you executed it, you cannot ask one of these seek items that you've taken, you can't ask what it is, because until it's constructed, you won't know. It may fail. If you had something that was DBI-ish, for all we know, in the time it took you to actually construct this thing, the key that you're looking up in the database might have been deleted. You might have lost your connection to the database. The socket might have gone down. Any kinds of things that will blow it up can happen to you. Okay, Larry gets this one. This is beware people who consume sequences. If you're going to use sequences, you're probably going to have catch and try and all kinds of fun things around them. Sanity check what you get back. That laziness is great for performance, but it means that you might or might not get what you expect. Testing it, 2 ways. I can convert everything to an array. There's an eager. And then walk down it. Once I've eagerized it, I can ask, how many are there? Until I've done that, I can't. But again, smart matches solve it much more easily. If I create a list of what I expect, or I have 2 of these sequences, I can smart match them. Smart match will do the right thing. It'll instantiate as much of each as on the other. They'll just get compared. So, more testing. If I do a scan up, I can compare what I get scanning up with default arguments, what I get scanning up with the explicit name of the program. I should get the same thing. One will default to bin, one will find the parent, but I should get the same list of directories. And thankfully, I do. Append. This is, if all this did was walk up the directory tree, it wouldn't be very useful. You could split it on slashes. So you can stick something on the end of it. Again, if I do the same thing with append, going from the program, if you enjoy looking at this stuff, you'll see a lib on the end of all of these. One thing, of course, this is Perl. There's more than one way to pass in falsity. So if I use FineBin verbose, 2 things should happen. I should have bin, and I can say verbose arrow false, verbose parens false, bang verbose. I should still get the same path every time, no matter how I turn off verbosity. So, simple check for the arguments. Pragmata. These are cute because they run at compile time. Therefore, if I give you a subroutine, if I just say, call this and use the libraries, it's too late. The whole point of this is having stuff on your path that when you do use frobnicate, it's there. And I actually do use a frobnicate in here. So these look a little bit different if you want to be able to have something that somebody uses it and they get the immediate side effect. The way I did it here was with the export, which is the old import, which I guess meant we had to change at least one name in the... So, first thing to notice, export lives outside of the module. It lives outside of the package FineBin libs. This is normally used for the... it's normally used for positionals. So I don't have all the nice, cute variable names with the colons and all the rest of it. I have to check for them. So we have first, last, any. I can say if there's a resolve on it, use that. One nice thing, the colon cleanser. I had to get one bad one in. You can replace parens with a colon. And that's, it allows things like that to look a lot cleaner. Or you can, if you like Python, you can even stagger them and do all kinds of stuff. You can vertically align them. But it's a lot easier than counting, little bits and pieces of things. So looking at what I do with FineBin, most of this should be pretty straightforward by now. I use the parent. I've got some standard arguments. I scan up. And now for all of the directories I found, for every file system I get back, I want to use the registry. First thing you notice is I'm only going to get one registry back for each of these directories. Instead of putting a for loop, I can use given. That tells somebody looking at this, there's going to be one of these. So you don't have to think about, are they really iterating it or not? Another thing you notice is dir here. Yeah, what I got back in this collection of paths was a dir, but notice that the parameter name is prefix. I can make it a little more obvious by saying that's what I'm using for this. Also, I can compress these. The given is kind of if there's only one. I hate this form. I just, I can see people actually now just trying to line up the parens. Replace those with colons. I think that's pretty readable. If you had to figure out what that was doing, you could probably look at it and decide without me describing it too much. So you can write pretty clear Perl 6. And then, name parameters. When I did the prefix, I could see at least one person. Yes, prefix does tie my code to the API. You've got that $: prefix, and if you don't want that name. But signatures allow that $: part is a shortcut for creating a pair. So you can have, if you want to change, anyone here ever pick a bad variable name? Oh, yeah. No. Never. Okay, well then, just talking to you alone, because all these guys are perfect, you can rename the variable in your code without anyone on the outside having to know. Because you can call it anything you want. I can leave the variable alone. Everyone hates the word prefix. Okay, fine, call it add. But I don't have to modify my code. There's an extra layer of independence there, so that if people start using this with, $: whatever, it's still pretty flexible. Now, the one thing I didn't show you before, there's a map for what I export. The map is a list of names to values. And what I do is I export the directories I found, mainly for error messages. Notice the @ sign is part of the name. You export the sigil along with the name of the variable. And that is FineBin lives, right there, the export. The unit is a placeholder. The export does all of the work. There's nothing in the unit. Testing it, check for directories. This is the fun part. This is where I get to use Frobnicate. This will work if I have two modules, tlib Frobnicate, FineBin Frobnicate. Notice I was polite. I put it in FineBin in case there is a core Frobnicate. And there's a lib FineBin Frobnicate. Something running out of a test directory should prefer the one under tlib. So this is the test. If I use the module, for the odds of there being a core FineBin Frobnicate, if I can use the module at all, FineBin libs did its job. It put these directories into the use libs. And if I get tlib back as the string, I know I picked the right one. And thankfully, I do. And proof 6, by the way, looks a lot like proof. I mean, if you're used to using proof, aside from having to reach for that 6 every time, it's muscle memory. And that's a working version of FineBin libs. So, yeah, the summary is that Perl 6 is actually quite doable. Most of the improvements in the language, or most of the changes in the language, seem to be improvements. You bang your head against quirks a lot less often. MI6, I'd say that, or there's a link in the end of this to the page for this one at til.nl that tells you how assist works. One bad thing about assist is it says run Pearl6 Dock, and then it fails. So you have to go to the website to see how to run assist. But one of those two should help. The documentation, docs.pearl6.org is actually quite searchable now. It's got a lot in it. Whoever's been working in that thing deserves a beer, man. They've made life a lot better for all of us. One thing I didn't show was like the dollar variable. There's an anonymous variable. It's not $_, it's completely anonymous. So there's all sorts of fun things to mine for this. And that's it. So did that seem useful to people? How many people are awake? Okay, well, I got at least a couple of. Well, that's if you start chewing on somebody's arm, we know it's gotten really bad.
So now I know how to make a propagate package that I'm going to publish. Yeah.
Just don't put it in FineBin, and I would actually, even if you did, it wouldn't affect my life because I would still find the T FineBin, and I'd still prefer it with my path. So unless your Frobnicate actually returns the same path as mine, I still won't blow up in the test.
So in that last test slide, you were testing against a string path with slashes. And you said you don't have a VMS machine available to test on.
No, but see, the thing is, if you look at it, the quick thing, go to end. Hang on, I'm going the wrong direction here. But look, if you look at the actual module, it returns a constant called the constant frob path is exported by default as that string. These could have been foo and bar. It just looked prettier if I had the paths in it, and I thought it made it a little more obvious if somebody else had to look at it that what I was trying to accomplish. I could call them oops and whoops. But yes, if this used something like the absolute path of the module, and I tried to do that, and I could not find any way in Perl for a module to report to me the path of the module as it was being compiled. So, and most of the time you don't really care about that anyway, so I can see why they didn't do it. Any other? Yeah. What?
Could you please show me expert sub once again?
The what?
Not really sure. The slide was expert path. I mean, you parse arguments manually, but you can actually use multi-dispatch for expert as well, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just said that you take sloppy arguments for expert.
Yeah.
And then you parse them manually. You check for them manually.
Yeah. Exporter, if the way exporter works, it gets a list.
Yeah, I mean you can multi-dispatch with this list as well.
Oh yeah.
You can use constants.
Oh yeah.
I mean it's not necessary to do it.
With first, I tried it and Pearl60 told me to bugger off. I don't. It didn't. I'm told that I'm done. When I tried it, it gave me an error.
Did you put multi-sub?
No, I just put export. Actually, I followed the instructions on docs.pearl6.org that said this was for handling positional parameters, and I just grabbed it as *@args. I will stick this on my SlideShare. If anyone looks up SlideShare and me, it'll, I think, probably be at the top in about half an hour. And now, let me disconnect this thing, give the nice people back.